You ever read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? I remember reading that book from a relatively young age and finding it very interesting the way the book sets up the idea of male and female as if we were two different species from two different planets speaking two different languages and trying to understand each other. And obviously, it's not fully true in that sense, but there is some truth to it. There's some reality and something realistic to the way we speak about men and women speaking past each other and not really fully understanding what they are both speaking about sometimes. On this beautiful Saturday morning, that's if you're watching this video when it's coming out. If you're wondering what on earth am I talking about, well, no, I have not transformed into a relationship coach. And yes, there's still some news going on and some very interesting things going on. I'm seeing some interesting things going on with the police with respect to the state of emergency and how they use their powers. But I think this morning I'll speak about some relationship and gender issues, some interesting articles and studies that I stumble across for quite some time now, but when they accumulate, the picture that they paint is very interesting. And that's the thing with knowledge, that's the thing with information, that's the thing with science. It's not that, as I said, it's not that I'm a relationship advice guru or anything even close to that, but I think if you have some knowledge about reality, about facts, about statistics, about things that actually happen, not the way that you want things to be, not the way that you feel things should be, not the way that you would wish they should be, but the way that they actually are. Having that knowledge is some power to you. It allows you to be able to better make decisions based on reality. If I know what is actually happening in a situation, then the response that I have to this situation would be more likely to work because I actually know what the problem is. If I have no idea the reality of a situation, so say I am a plumber and someone is calling me in to fix a problem they have with their plumbing or something like that, but it's the pandemic, so they don't want me to come to their home. They want me to tell them how to solve the problem over the phone, and they aren't telling me realistically what the problem is. I don't have an accurate picture of what the problem is. Would I ever be able to even come close to solving a problem if I don't have an accurate picture of what the problem is? So, what exactly is this problem that I'm speaking about? Well, where this came from is watching some male aimed videos recently, some videos aimed at young men, at young single men particularly, and the tone that it took, the way a lot of these young men look at relationships with a kind of precise scientific side. They're talking about how many closures they've had recently and how what's their percentage, what's their turnover percentage rate. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, this just isn't sounding right. But when I read some more and I researched some more and I understood the perspective and the angle they were coming from, you could understand why things could seem that way. They could seem like there's a burgeoning battle between the genders being formed. I'd say if you're on the internet and you're familiar with internet culture, for possibly the last 10, 12 years, the earlier part in that was more so an offensive from the internet feminist side and the counterattacks against those feminists, the anti-feminist movements that occurred. And now you're seeing as some of the male rights and the meninist movements, as they reached to some, a lot of them were just trolls and jokes in the beginning, but some have taken up some very serious points and some very serious roles, and the men involved with them, the young men, are very serious about what they're doing. And when you hear them speak, they're framing things in the perspective of they're trying to conquer or they're battling against something that seems like a female-focused world where they are at a disadvantage. And if you are someone who would have grown up hearing about the patriarchy and the way that men have historically kept women oppressed and kept women underneath, then when you hear some of these more modern men speak, what they're talking about may sound insane to you. And I think that has some men are from Mars, women are from Venus in it, because sometimes we're speaking past each other. There's this statistic, a very interesting statistic that came up since the advent of online dating, since online dating came about. Some statistics about how dating is done have become kind of clearer, because online, what online is very good at, it may not be good at encouraging proper social cohesion, it may not be good at building proper culture, but it is certainly good at accumulating data. So online dating has allowed for some of these studies to happen. And an interesting study did happen. It showed that what this study set out to do is ask men and women, yes, it's one of those studies, separate them into two groups and ask them a question. They asked men and women to rate the attractiveness of men and women. So they asked the women to rate the attractiveness of men, and they asked the men to rate the attractiveness of women. And there was something very interesting that they noticed. Men rated women on a basically regular bell curve. That means the majority of women, as you would expect if you're looking at a large population, the majority of people would be somewhere in the middle. There'd be less to the super attractive end and less to the super unattractive end. But it wasn't that way with the women. Women find 80% of men unattractive, says crazy study. Women are often thought of as picky, especially where men are concerned. Some single women are known to have lists of characteristics that the ideal man must possess, like great abs, a sense of humor, a six-figure income, and a nice car. When a woman meets a potential mate, she has to decide which of these traits are deal breakers and which she can let go. No matter how selective a woman might be, some have strict physical attributes from their must-have lists, as an OkCupid study found that women find 80% of men unattractive. So let me break down what that means if you don't fully get it yet. What that means is that if a woman sees 10 average men, we pick 10 random men out of the population of men in the world, in Trinidad, let's use Trinidad or the Caribbean, women will generally find 8 out of those 10 men unattractive. So 8 out of these 10 men are already starting at a disadvantage, where if they are trying to have a prospective go at some one of these women, very likely you have an 8 out of 10 chance that they would find you unattractive. And possibly a chance also that they may find you very unattractive in that list. And that's very interesting, isn't it? That men see women by and large on an even scale, so it's predictable. The most women are average, and you have on the both sides. But women, the most men, the average man to the average woman is an unattractive man. Now, that is funny by itself, but on a global scale, and if you watched my previous video, if you didn't, well, I'll run that through a bit, where I spoke about the globalization of the marketplace, of the relationship marketplace, where technology and social media has allowed for us to have access to a global market when we're talking about prospective suitors, when we're talking about people we may want. Now, the interest in this to me isn't just academic, it isn't just information. The interest in this to me is societal, because I think the rudimentary building block of our society is family. And when we're looking across at different societies in any country in the world, when you look at what causes a society to decay, what causes a society to fall apart, it almost always starts with a decaying of the family. And I think it may be fair to say that we're seeing that. We're seeing a decaying of the family, we're seeing a surge in single parents, and we're seeing a surge in people that have no interest in anything to do with family. And that's your choice, that's anyone's choice. But if you think about it on the side of humanity, on the side of being a human, on the side of our species, if no one has an interest or no one has the ability to propagate our species successfully, then we're literally talking about a species level existential crisis. And I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think we ever stand the risk of us not propagating, of no one wanting to propagate the species. But what I think we do stand the risk of is us losing what the understanding is of healthy relationships. And if our society cannot be built on the ground structure and the main base structure of healthy relationships that would build healthy families, then can we really be surprised when we see societies falling apart? So with the globalization of the relationship marketplace, that 80 to 20% relationship where only 20% of the men could be seen in the attractive side. If we were talking about back 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago even, the men within a woman's circle, she finds 80% of them unattractive, but that only 20% that she may find attractive, she may not have had access really to them in the first place, so for lack of a better word, it would have forced some amount of settling. Now, I'm using the word settling there, hoping that you understand the context of it. Because in terms of this settling, we're only talking about attractiveness, physical features. And any mature person would understand that physical features aren't the most important thing in a relationship. But to the person who is finding that this person is unattractive, they may see it as settling. They settled for this person. When we have now the globalization of the marketplace, women can find access to these 20% of attractive men. If these women were to choose who they want, who they think are attractive, it's a very small number. And obviously, from the get-go there, you could see that there's a mismatch in the numbers. There'd be a larger amount of women. 80% of the women would be less attractive than this 20% that they only find attractive. So you'd always have that mismatch. But now you'd have 80% of men knowingly at a disadvantage because these young men, they are perceptive. They can pick up that they aren't the prime crop, they aren't the prime target for these young ladies. And what I am noticing, this is something that I'm noticing. You could drop a comment and tell me if this is something that you find you're noticing too. That a lot of these 80% of men, bear in mind, that's a large majority of men. A lot of them now are pursuing relationships with a much more strategic head, which takes out some of the emotional and personal side of it. And that doesn't lead towards healthy interactions between the genders. But there are reasons for it, because there are some interesting things that go along with that 80% unattractive figure. In the online dating world, another statistic that was found from the same OkCupid website when they did some digging and researching on it. Bear in mind, this isn't hard and fast rules for everyone. It's trends. It's how things generally lean. What they found was that women peaked in their early 20s, somewhere around 22. So, every man at any age messaged, for the most part, women between the ages of 20 to 22. Any woman after the age of 22 started getting less and less and less messages. However, men peaked at, guess the age. Unless you knew this study, I don't think anyone would have guessed the age. The age men peak at in the online dating world is 50. So, follow me if you can. It's some simple statistics if you follow where you'd see a disparity going on now. So, women find generally 80% of men unattractive. So, there's an 80% of men starting off, let's say at the age of 20, going up in age, knowing that the vast majority of women find them unattractive. But they find 20 to 22-year-old women are the most attractive. At 20 years old, that would have been the woman they would have been going after. And at 20 years old, because remember the peak is at 50, they're very far away from their peak. At 20 years old, this 20-year-old man tracking or going after this 20-year-old woman would very likely have been rejected. But as time progresses and as he ages, he becomes more and more attractive. But here's the thing, he becomes more and more attractive to women from the age of 20 go up, because women aren't only attracted to the young men, all of the women are attracted to 50-year-old men. But all of the men are attracted to 20-year-old women. So this man, as he increases in value, as they like to use that term in modern times as they talk about dating, as he increases in value, he is targeting the same woman he would have been targeting all along. But he's targeting the same age group of women. The same woman, as in the same women themselves, are aging with him. They may be successful in careers now. And you could look at my previous video on gender and women and all of that to see what my thoughts and what these statistics show. You know, one of the things that I find with this, to just go off a bit on a tangent with that, one of the things that I find interesting with it, I think that our society has prioritized male values. Typical male values. Let me use the word typical male values. So, the things that we boast about most in society are things that would have been historically, typically male values. And there's no natural, obvious reason that these things could be seen more valuable than historically, typically female values. Maybe some of the male values can be monetized more. So the male workaholic who could go and work for 24 hours and he works those hours for so many days a week, that value can be monetized more easily. But the more historically typical female value of being attentive and being empathetic, that's a bit harder to monetize. But that's not to say that it is any less valuable. And if we're being honest about how we view value in our society right now, we do view value with a male slant and as if the male traits and things that are more typically masculine are more valuable. I just find that very interesting, that seems to be the slant that we have in modern times. Isn't that sexism in and of itself? Anyway, so these men are aging and they would have been shunned at 20, thrown off at 20, and as they age, they're seeing themselves gain in value. So you're having these men that were once rejected becoming more and more appealing, and these women that were more appealing becoming more and more rejected. So you're having that reversal of roles as the ages change. And some of these men have become aware of this fact, and they attempt to use that knowledge with great arrogance to pound it into some woman that if you don't take me now, you won't get me later. And for one, that's not a good technique to try and get a woman. You don't want someone that is living with you for the only reason being that they can't find anyone else. At least I wouldn't want that. But some men in modern times, that's the way they use it. They wield that knowledge nearly as a weapon. But it's nothing to boast about. It's not a gloat. It's just the way reality works. And it's not something that you should be attempting to abuse to your benefit. It's something that I think we should use to understand ourselves better and to better make decisions. Like when I understand that women, in terms of dating value, I'm not talking about intrinsic value here. If you think so, I'm not. So I hope that is clarified. Women in dating value are seen as most valuable between those early 20s ages, and men in dating value are seen as most valuable at that 50-year age group. Then you could understand why most people marry somewhere in between both. So the man isn't at his peak value yet, and the woman has left her peak value, and you could understand why somewhere around 30 you see some of that settling happening. And to me, here's the balance of them. When you put both together, when you understand that women see 80% of men as unattractive, then you could understand, though, that the woman's primary means of judging a man's attractiveness isn't even his physical attractiveness. That's why women peak for dating for men is at 50. You can ask anyone. That's not the peak for men in their physical attractiveness. It's not at 50. But the peak for women is at 20 because men's primary look for women is actually physical and youthful. So if many women have leaning on their scale, looking for someone who has the ability to provide, not necessarily needing you to give anything to her, but it is still what many females, many women find attractive in men because of history and because of just how our species has developed. But many men, what they find attractive is youth and virility. So that's the disparity there. And I think if both sexes, if both genders can understand these things about themselves and about each other, we could both live on Earth, and one doesn't have to be on Mars and one doesn't have to be on Venus, and we could understand certain things about each other better. So you little 20-year-old boy, when you're rejected by the 20-year-old girl, you understand it's not just that you're ugly. It may be that you're ugly too, but it's not just that. But women are looking for some security and she doesn't yet see it in you. And maybe you woman that have passed 30 and you may be successful in your career and you're wondering where have all the good men gone. Some of those good men may not be looking for you, and you can understand why from a biological perspective, and not just say that these men are nasty for looking for who their biological imperative pushes them to look for. Does that make sense to any of you? Leave some feedback for me. Tell me what you think. Tell me if that sounds like it makes some sense and it gives some balance to this discussion. And don't forget to share the video and see if you could find some opinions about what some other people may think on the matter too. And click that like button if you enjoy this style of content. And subscribe too if you aren't yet subscribed. But I doubt you aren't subscribed and you're this far into the video. And I'll see you tomorrow for the next video at 10 a.m.
And you feel the music rising with the time.